Mention the word Botswana, and in many people's minds, the image of diamonds emerges. And of course, that world-famous line, diamonds are forever. Well, that is good, but that also masks many other good things that are happening in Botswana, like world-class tourism sector and entrepreneurs that are taking on their counterparts on the African continent. Today, we have an opportunity to shine a light on one of those gems. And yes, the pun is intended. We're talking about the Botswana Stock Exchange. Let me introduce to you the guests that are going to be taking us through that discussion today. First up is Thapelo Treule. He is the CEO of the Botswana Stock Exchange. We also have Olebile Makupe, Director, RMB Botswana. And last but not least, Ferguson, Botswana Country CEO, Lesego Holdings. For more insight, we have this short pack.
My name is Thapelo Muribame. I'm the head of market development. There are a number of factors that make it easy for foreign companies and domestic companies to list on the Botswana Stock Exchange. Firstly, the fact that Botswana does not have restrictions on the inflows and outflows of currency. So that makes it easy for investors to raise capital here and expand to the rest of the world. Botswana has strong macroeconomic fundamentals with a strong focus on price stability. And we also have a very stable political environment because we hold elections every 5 years. So that gives investors comfort that this is a market that they can access. Our selling point as a market is the fact that Botswana has abundant capital from pension funds that is looking for assets to invest in. So case in point, in the year 2019, for example, I think about 30% of the assets were invested onshore, with a significant percentage invested on listed securities. So this really supports the notion that as a market, we have abundant capital chasing too few assets. So as such, we encourage companies, both domestic and foreign, to take advantage of this abundant capital.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on the program today. Let me give the honors of talking about what the Botswana Stock Exchange offers to you, Thapelo.
Thank you. Botswana Stock Exchange offers a platform where institutions that want to raise capital can easily come to the market to raise capital. And it also offers investment opportunities for investors who might have some cash or investment they want to make. And therefore, we have a very successful platform that have been able to afford companies the opportunity to raise capital over a period of years, and successfully so. And we also have a number of investors who have been able to take advantage of investment opportunities offered by Botswana Stock Exchange in form of shares, bonds, and exchange-traded funds.
Yeah. Talking about stock exchange during these times, of course, requires that we must talk about the impact of COVID-19 and the outlook for the exchange. In general, when we look at the whole of the Botswana Stock Exchange, how has the market reacted to the impositions that have come with government attempts to try to prevent the spread of COVID-19?
Yeah, I think it has actually been a mixed bag of reaction in terms of the market. When COVID started last year, I think the first few months, or in March 2022, around April, I think the index levels or the performance of the market was still solid. It was actually doing fine. But then we reached a point where we could not resist or defend ourselves as the market against the consequences of COVID. And ultimately, we had some negative decline, or we have some decline in terms of the index, and we closed the year on a negative territory. But the most pleasing thing is that for the months of April 2021 May 2021, we have seen the index returning to incremental levels. We experienced a 0.9% increase. And also for the few weeks of June, we have seen the index going up. And therefore, the expectation or the hope is that the market might be on course for recovery, as we have also seen the increase in terms of the activity in the market. When COVID hit last year, activity was much subdued due to the fact that investors were actually taking a wait and see situation. They didn't want to buy, they didn't want to sell, because I think they couldn't form an opinion because of the pandemic. But when you look at the activity now, you realize that there's a slight increase in terms of the trading levels, and trading levels are starting to pick up. And also, most importantly, on the listing side, so far this year, we have had 4 listings, especially from the corporates in terms of bonds, 2 in February, and we just had 2 again today, in addition to government bond listings. So we are seeing increased activity, especially in the debt market.
Yeah. Olebile, let me come to you to talk about the background to the recovery that Thapelo is talking about. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the economic situation. We know, of course, Botswana, like South Africa, like the other neighbors, such as Zimbabwe, as well as Namibia, has been hit by infections as a result of the COVID-19 spread. From your perspective, just give us a quick overview of the economic prospects for Botswana.
Obviously, Botswana hasn't been isolated from the impact of COVID. We have seen a slowdown in the level of economic activity, with a contraction of 7.9 registered in the year 2020. And we expect the economy to recover to between 4.5 and 5% in the next 2 years. So we have seen contraction, mostly in the areas of tourism, as well as trade and manufacturing industries. We, however, have also seen corporates also being quite resilient, especially in the retail space, where we have actually seen an increase in activity post the December period after we came out of lockdown. So we have also seen a lot of support coming from government in the form of easing of liquidity conditions, which helped us as commercial banks to be able to extend credit to corporates which were looking to expand. We also saw a number of other measures, such as provision of credit guarantees by government to help support especially medium and larger commercial clients, as well as SMEs, with credit guarantees, which were looking to raise funding from the market. So it has been a mixed picture, where we've seen contractions in the primary sectors, but we've also seen opportunities coming out in the corporate sector as activity also picked up. So the activity that Thapelo also alluded to in the bond market, we also saw in the commercial space, where a lot of corporates have actually been raising funding from market, both for local activities as well as regional expansion and regional activities.
Yeah. So we're going to come back and talk about what the market is offering. Let's say, for instance, foreign investors who are looking at the Botswana Stock Exchange. Of course, the very purpose of our debate today is to cast a light on the opportunities that are offered by this Botswana Stock Exchange. Let me come to you, that's Fergus, and talk about, from an experience perspective, you are listed on the Botswana Stock Exchange. 21 years ago, the company was listed. Let's talk about the kind of conditions that you are dealing with within the real economy and the kind of issues that you are seeing emerging. And I know you are in many other countries. We're going to come and talk about that. Let's place a light on Botswana at the moment, just for now.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. I think, like all financial institutions, Letshego in Botswana is also seeing a lot of challenge. We are primarily a retail lender. The retail lender market in itself has been impacted by consumer credit appetite. However, what we are also seeing is that through our listing on the Botswana Stock Exchange, for those consumers who are looking at saving or investment, being a fully listed entity, those consumers are able to actually participate as being shareholders of Letshego. I think in the past year, Godfrey, Letshego announced a dividend yield of around 16%, one of the highest in the market. So there's a lot of benefit both on the investment side, whilst we're seeing some challenges on the lending side.
Yeah, my eyes popped when you say the dividend yield of 16%, because if you got that on this Johannesburg Stock Exchange, you'd be certainly one of the big winners. So when you look, though, at the prospects for 2021, we were joking before the show started, where we were talking about the third wave and the restrictions that we're seeing from the government. What kind of impact do you see, number one, on operations, and then secondly, on the consumer?
There was a lot of support and assistance, Godfrey, to be honest, from government, especially in Botswana and also across the African continent. We haven't seen any layoffs in terms of public sector, but even the private sector as well, we have not seen significant layoffs in the private sector. For Letshego, we went on a very, very aggressive digitization program, where we've now launched what we call a Let's Go platform, which is really, really helping in terms of moving customers and consumers onto digital versus the old brick and mortar type of banking or financial services. We do see this as more an acceleration of the strategy that we had already put in place. We believe that this will help us as we maneuver through the COVID crisis as it is, and that we will continue delivering solid results as a financial institution. Yeah. Thank you, Godfrey.
Yeah. Thapelo, I don't know how many opportunities you get to sell the Botswana Stock Exchange as a place where you can place your money and get capital appreciation and big dividend yields like Fergus was talking about. I want to know why, if I were a foreign investor with my dollar, you would say, come to the BAC, don't look at the JSE.
Yeah, I think the reasons are simple. Number one, Botswana offers a number of competitive and comparative advantages, indeed, relative to South Africa. I mean, we don't have exchange controls here, and that in itself is a big plus. Yeah. That explains the fact why about 46 to about 52% of our investors are foreigners. We actually attract a lot of activity from people outside the country. And also, I think our market offers good opportunities. I mean, it might look small relative to the bigger markets in Africa, but in terms of efficiency and market returns, like Fergus have said, I think a lot of our companies actually have been offering very good returns. And also, if you look at the metrics, investment metrics right now, I think the fundamentals in terms of price earnings ratios and dividend yields for most of our companies are still very good for investors. So the return is still there. And also the way we do things, I mean, it's simpler to work with us. And that's what most of the companies that have listed in Botswana have realized. Mainly because of our smallness, people are able to get responses and issues addressed as quickly as possible, which is what listed entities normally want. That is why we're able to attract a number of big companies. And also, we are just about to list a AAA rated institution, which in fact we're competing with some of the bigger markets in Africa, but they realize that Botswana is the best place to list that fund.
Yeah, that sounds exciting to hear, and I'm hoping that you remember to invite her to come and cover that listing if it does happen. I wanted to talk about one of the challenges of small markets, liquidity. We always hear it around when we talk about trying to get our investors to come into the Southern African region. You hear many say, oh no, it's difficult to get your money out. It's difficult to trade the stock on some of the smaller stock exchange. Talk to me about what you are doing as the Botswana Stock Exchange to improve that. And then also maybe let's touch on regulation, because that's a key consideration for foreign investors, isn't it?
Yes. Liquidity is a challenge to most of African and emerging market in Africa. And I think, relatively speaking, Botswana, relative to other markets, I think have done extremely very well over the years. I think even before COVID, I think we have seen improved liquidity in majority of the stocks. But the problem in Botswana is also compounded by the fact that we generally have a huge, relative to the size of the economy, pension fund industry, which I think most of the investors in our market are pension fund investors who normally hold for long term, and does have got consequences in terms of the liquidity in the market. But I think in terms of the liquidity, we looked at about 4 strategies. That is product development. We also looked at regulation of the market. We also looked at massive market education. I'll tell you, over the past 4 years, we're able to increase the number of investors in our market from about 23,000 to 98,000 as I speak to you now, which brings a lot of diversity to the market. And the good thing is that majority of these people actually are citizens of Botswana, who we are very proud that they're able to partake part of the national cake, because listed entities in a stock exchange are benefiting from the economy, and therefore the locals are also benefiting from this listed entity. And also the market infrastructure. You'll be happy to appreciate that our market infrastructure is top class. I mean, we use the same trading system as the one that is used by JSE and the one that is used by London. In any case, we got our trading system from London Stock Exchange. So you can see the state of art in terms of the infrastructure that we have is able to actually bring a lot of market integrity to our market. And also this brings me to the issue of regulation of the market. Yeah. Our market is regulated as per international best standard, because we are an affiliate of World Federation of Exchanges, and we are also a member of African Stock Exchanges. And therefore, our listing rules, our trading rules, and our market operations are of world-class standard.
Absolutely. I think it's correct what they say when they say you learn every single day. I didn't know there's no foreign exchange controls in Botswana. And I certainly didn't know that your trading system is best in class with the likes of the JSE. Or I wanted your thoughts on 2 of those things. Yeah, one, regulation. Your thoughts in terms of the environment for someone to come in and invest on the Botswana Stock Exchange and the rules that govern it. And then secondly, the issue of liquidity.
Okay. I think in terms of regulation, the key benefit in investing in the Botswana Stock Exchange is the fact that because there are no exchange controls, it's easy to move funds in and funds out of the country. Obviously, we do operate within Financial Institution Act, which looks at the use of proceeds of funds. That's what governs the movement of funds in the country. And the other regulations that I feel also really make it easy for institutions to come and invest here is, first of all, a very favorable capital gains tax, which is very competitive relative to other African countries. And if you look at the ease of reporting as well in the Botswana market, is very easy to get information, both from regulators as well as from the tax authorities. So the governance environment is very transparent, and the rule of law actually does apply in Botswana. Yeah. So that's what makes Botswana very attractive from a regulatory environment perspective. I think one of the other factors that we also look at, obviously, as we assess investment opportunities, is the monetary policy, the environment under which we operate as commercial banks. Is very easy for corporates to raise funding across different points on the curve due to a very expansionary monetary policy at the moment, which makes access to funding very cheap at the moment. We've actually seen a reduction of rates of up to 8% in the last 5 years, and it really allows corporates to be able to raise funding that's needed for their operations. So I think from a liquidity perspective, we do try to use a distribution network as well as commercial banks to try and encourage trading of all capital instruments, from bonds to to availing access to the small investor if they want to buy stocks. So we actually have partnerships with brokers where we're able to try and drive liquidity to help provide access to these financial instruments. So yeah, I think the regulatory environment is very allowing. It makes it easy for movement of capital across different sources. And then from an investor perspective as well, we do provide access to investors through the various platforms that we offer as banks. And we actually work with corporates to promote listings and also the use of capital markets to raise funding.
Yeah.
So we drive different types of instruments through advisory services where if a client is looking to raise funding, we look beyond just commercial bank offering, but also put capital market solutions on the table.
Yeah.
And lately, we have actually seen interest in those instruments going up. We have interest from a number of companies that are looking to list on the exchange, and the implementation of boards such as the TPD board, which allows smaller investors to also access the capital markets, or also to help to drive liquidity in the Botswana Stock Exchange.
Yeah, Fergus, I want your thoughts on the same issues, but I also wanted your thoughts as a listed entity because you live the environment, don't you?
Absolutely, Godfrey. And just to build on Olibile's points, I think for Letshego, remember we both have a share listing as well as a debt listing.
Right.
Now, through that share and debt listing, we've obviously been able to expand from being a single country entity to now being in multiple geographies, now operating in 11 countries. And through the support of both the BSE and RMB, who are also our bankers, we've been able to do all of those, right? One of the things that we should also bear in mind is by being on the BSE, you're transparent. It gives a lot of other investors a lot of confidence in your ability to actually grow and pursue the strategy that we're pursuing today. So it's been a great journey for us. Both the BSE has been supportive of our growth. Like I said, we are proud to say that we are a truly African, Botswana originated financial services group, and forward we go.
Yeah, which is something to be celebrated, no question, because we know of certain companies on which this country was built on that are no longer domiciled here in Johannesburg or in any of the big cities here in South Africa. But I wanted to ask you, that ability to be able to grow out of Botswana, was that easy? How was that journey? And in terms of the regulation of your business, talk to someone who's thinking, should I go to Botswana, should I go to Harare, or can I go to Windhoek?
Well, I think it's been, it has not been easy, but it's been exciting for us as a Botswana-originated entity.
Yeah.
From a regulation perspective, we do obviously have to comply with all the individual country or geography legislations. But like I said, what we found is that by being listed on Botswana Stock Exchange, it gives one a lot of advantage as you go into Africa and you show who you are and what you're able to actually do. It also helps that in Botswana, we are a larger type business. The Botswana business today still contributes around 40% of group profits.
Sure.
Nonetheless, like I said, the Botswana Stock Exchange listing has helped to actually sell the story of Botswana and Letshego.
Yeah. The story of our listings, of course, cannot be complete when we don't talk about listing fees and the cost of being listed on a stock exchange. Thapelo, I'm going to come to you. I'll come back to you, Fergus, for you to give me your thoughts in terms of the cost of being listed on the Botswana Stock Exchange. Are you competitive, Thapelo?
Yeah, I think we are competitive. We haven't increased our fees for many years. I think for more than 6 to 7 years.
Sure.
And also, what we continually do is that we continually benchmark our fees relative to other markets, and also looking at the direction in terms of growth, where we are going. I mean, that's why we are also able to attract some of the regional funds and regional companies into our market, and we'll continue to reconsider the fees going forward, because now we know a lot of other companies have been affected by COVID, and therefore Across different boards, we'll still continue to revise our fees to look to still remain competitive. But if you look at what other market charge relative to us, I think we are on the right level.
Yeah, I wanted Fergus to respond to that, and I also wanted to say to him, by the way, Fergus, Chapelo told me before the program started that everything and anything you say here will not be held against you.
No, I think Chapelo is spot on. I think the when we look at it, the fees comparative to the benefits that we're actually accruing, it's a non-starter. It's definitely a worthwhile investment. It's worthwhile for Lesego to be listed on the Botswana Stock Exchange. So I think he's spot on. One of the more affordable, but also giving us a lot of advantage as you look at both raising capital and expanding into Africa.
Yeah. Olebile, I want your thoughts as well in terms of the cost of listings and in general, and also just the ability of companies to be able to bring product also to the market. After this discussion, I want us to move on and talk about listings and delistings. But let's cover this one on listings, Olebile.
Well, on the advisory mandates that we've had, where we assisted companies to list, fees have never proven to be much of a concern. The good thing is also that Stock Exchange also engages quite regularly with the market to assess whether the fee structure helps to advance the objective, to help list more and more companies on the Stock Exchange. So fees have never really proven to be much of an impediment insofar as listings are concerned.
Yeah, in Johannesburg, sorry. Did you finish your thought?
No, I was going to say the regular engagement with the Stock Exchange really, really helps.
Let's have a quick look at this.
There are some frequently asked questions about listing, so I'm going to focus on 3. The first one is, how do companies start the process of listing? So if you're a company out there and you want to list on the Botswana Stock Exchange, firstly, you have to appoint a sponsoring broker, and we currently have 4 brokers: Motswedi Securities, Stock Brokers Botswana, Imara, and African Alliance. So you can appoint any of those 4 brokers, and then you can proceed to assemble your team of advisors, corporate finance advisors, legal advisors. And then once your application is ready, you submit it to the Botswana Stock Exchange, and we take about 5 working days to respond. So depending on the quality of the submission, I think all in all, the listing process takes about 30 days. So the second question is always on whether listing is for bigger companies. Any company can access the market. In fact, at the Botswana Stock Exchange, we operate a multi-tier market system where companies of all sizes can list. We have 3 boards: the CPD board, which is for smaller companies, and then we have the venture board, and then we have the main board. So any company that's willing to list can list on any of those 3 boards. And for the CPD board and the venture capital board, you need not have any operating history. The other question is always on the listing fees. And obviously we have the listing fees on the Botswana Stock Exchange website, so any prospective issuer can look at that. And then the issuer also has total control over what they ultimately pay for the listing process, depending on the advisors that they would appoint.
I'm sure that's music to Chapelo's ears. I'm hoping at some stage we give him stuff to think about, stuff to go and do some homework. But Chapelo, I wanted us to talk about listings and delistings. Here in Johannesburg, we have seen delistings without question. 1, the environment has been difficult. 2, one of the issues raised is the issue of the cost of listings. Let's talk about what you have seen in terms of that pipeline that you were talking about. I want to know the sectors where you are seeing the greatest excitement.
Yeah, I think, look, listings in terms of retaining listings and attracting listings is a bit of a challenge to a lot of market in Africa. I mean, if you look at the study that was done by PwC, I think in 2019, you realize that Botswana Stock Exchange, in terms of attracting IPOs, is only second to Johannesburg Stock Exchange in Africa, in terms of the number of listings that are coming to the market. It's not me; it's the study done by PwC in 2019. And also, you look at the listing. The dynamics right now are very tricky, especially in terms of the equity listings, because the prices are subdued, the prices are low, and therefore equity listings are going to be very small. But I know for sure, I won't mention sectors, we are likely to see an equity listing in the BSE this year. And we are also likely to see an exchange-traded fund listing in the BSE this year. And then we have had 4 listings in terms of debt instruments this year. And we are also likely to see a AAA institution coming to Botswana Stock Exchange to list a bond. But of course, because of the challenges posed by COVID, and because of some of the opportunities provided by the current environment, you see some institutions becoming very attractive to private equity partners, to also some private individuals who ordinarily will buy these institutions and delist them from the market. And therefore, delistings is still part and parcel of the game. That is why at the BSE, we have actually drafted a strategy in terms of how we are going to be retaining listings and at the same time attracting listings. And so far, I think things are working well for us.
People may want to know exactly what that strategy entails. So perhaps if they're thinking about coming and listing, they will come to you. But tell me about the listing that you're expecting. Is that an IPO?
In terms of the equity, possibly yes.
Okay, possibly yes. All right. Okay, we'll leave it there. The IFC, International Finance Corporation, the private arm of the World Bank, years ago, I remember, they'd been pushing for the privatization of state-owned entities. We know Southern Africa is full of those because of our colonial legacy. Are there any plans by the Botswana government to bring some liquidity into the market by listing, by privatizing some of the state-owned enterprises?
Yeah, surely the plans have already been there. And I think we have had one successful listing so far at the Botswana Telecommunication that happened in about 2016. It was a massive IPO. It brought close to plus 30,000 or so new investors to the market. And it actually gave a lot of citizens an opportunity to play in the stock market. And then the only thing is that I think typical of every government, I think the privatization is pretty much slower in terms of divesting in some of the state-owned entities to let them privatize. But I think a lot of work is actually being done in the country, and also for sure I know in the continent, to encourage government to really privatize, especially to improve the governance structure of such state-owned entities, and also to relieve government of the pressures that of capital requirements that they need to finance some of the state-owned entities. Privatization in Botswana, pretty much slow, but I think we are seeing some new thinking that will probably influence how the speed of privatization moves. And we have always argued at the BSE that, you know, the best model to privatize state-owned entities is by listing them on the market, because it creates equal opportunities for everyone.
Yeah. Olabile, I want you to speak about that privatization story and the suitability, of course, of the companies that we are talking about to be listed. I mean, it's one thing to have a desire to list. It's another thing to bring in companies that are credible, that will attract investment. And also, Fergus, I wanted to say, if you've got your thoughts as a citizen, absolutely, please feel free to come in. Let's begin with Olabile.
Thanks very much for that question. We actually believe there's a lot of companies that are operating in Botswana that we believe are scalable and can actually list on the Botswana Stock Exchange. In terms of the parastatals, the government has announced an intention to rationalize the number of parastatals and also reduce the amount of work that is being done by government by privatizing some key sectors. So we definitely see a lot of potential for growth, both for government owned entities as well as private institutions that operate in the Botswana market. I think case in point, if you look at the energy sector, we believe there's a lot of opportunities there for government to privatize that particular sector and start acquiring or procuring power from independent sources. That obviously provides an opportunity for those companies to give access to Botswana to also invest on the stock exchange in those companies. And then if you look at the private sector as well, there's a lot of large private sector companies that operate in this market that are held in private hands. And we feel there's a great opportunity for them to provide investment opportunities both to the investor community as well as to the 30,000 customers that we saw participating in the listing of the telecommunications company that happened a few years ago. So we really believe, given the liquidity that's available in the market for investment in the pension funds industry, where they have an opportunity to either invest offshore or onshore, and they're always short of local assets to invest in, we really believe there is sufficient liquidity and the sufficient investors who are looking for investment opportunities or assets in the local market. So we believe through our engagements as well, we should see a lot more private companies come into market for listings. But of course, I think you did say we should put Thapelo on the spot. I think one of the challenges that we face is as a small market, liquidity can also be very thin. So you tend to find that listed companies experience very little trading. But as we list more and more and investment funds go into these assets, it will improve the amount of liquidity that we see in the market. Because we believe right now, the problem is once an investor gets hold of an asset, they hold on to it, and that then stifles secondary market trading. But we believe with more and more companies coming into the exchange, that will definitely improve the amount of liquidity in the market.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fergus, you want to come in?
Well, clearly for me, the potential listing of parastatals or government-owned enterprises, as you said, has got a lot of upsides. I think the ability to participate in an environment where you are inevitably having to strengthen your governance, ability to also be an environment where it's competitive, right? As a listed entity, there's a lot of focus around productivity, around performance of the entity, because that's got a downward impact on your share price and so forth. So I think there's a lot of upside for possible listing of both government-owned as well as private entities.
Yeah.
I think also as a Botswana, broadening the ownership base of all of these entities, I think will also create a lot of excitement for the local retail investor out there.
Yeah, reading between the lines from everything that you guys are saying, clearly there is pent-up demand for the kind of securities that we are talking about. So I want to come back and talk a little bit about the privatization drive. I'm going to pose this question to you, Olebile. Thapelo, please feel free to come in as well, and you can also answer in Ferguson. Do you see the political will that enable the privatization of these companies to create a sure path that we can say in the next 5-10 years, we're going to see more companies coming onto the Botswana Stock Exchange from the government side before we talk about the private side?
I think there's definitely a political will to see privatization happen, especially with government increasingly coming under fiscal pressure. So there is a need, and it's felt both by the investor market as well as government, for some of these parastatals to stand alone and be able to raise their own funding. So the government a few years ago set up an entity that's geared towards privatization. And it did do some work with various companies and eventually led to the successful listing of Botswana Telecoms Corporations. But I know they are also engaging with other parastatals with the view of bringing them to market. The government a few years ago publicly announced that they were looking to list the national airline, Air Botswana. And I believe a lot of work is also going into that. So the willingness does seem to be there. Just that decision making, as you know, within the government sector can also take a long time. But the willingness and the intent is definitely there. So I do believe in the next few years, some of these parastatals will eventually be listed.
Yeah, but Bolebile, that's your job, right?
That's correct. It is my job. Our job is to advise these parastatals as well as government on the value of listing, as well as to prepare these companies for eventual listing.
Yep.
So, but the decision first has to be made for us to come in. So, first of all, the government has to decide that they are going to list. But we are ready to help with advisory services whenever these companies or these parastatals are actually ready to come to market.
Absolutely. Thapelo?
Yeah, I think the political will is there. And also, I think we have seen increased interest, especially after the successful listing of PTCL, the telecommunication company. And therefore, I think the willingness, if not coming forth, will be compounded by the economic pressures, like Ulewile point out, that the need for capital by some of these institutions, some of which actually can be turned around into very successful businesses, I think will compel government to actually let them off in one way or the other. Yeah. And I think we are looking forward to that. Although no official pipeline in terms of which ones, except a few, are coming to the market, I think government will need to get work around that and then bring them to the market.
Yeah. So Olebile mentioned something that I found interesting. She said there are large private sector companies that potentially could be coming onto the market. And here we are putting you on the spot, Thapelo. Why are those companies not on the BSE?
Yeah, but thank you. I think we have a number of companies that are in private hands. And you know, due to the structure of the economy of Botswana, you realize that majority of these companies are still in the hands of first generation, which typically, according to basic economics, is that, you know, they still have a lot of emotional attachment to list these companies. But we are seeing a change in that regard because of our persuasion and our follow-up to majority of these owners. And what we also plan to do going forward, because majority of these companies have been impacted by COVID. And now the pressure for them to raise capital for either productive capacity or for expansion capacity is more high than ever. And therefore, we've been following a lot of these companies to try to persuade them to come to the market. Because I think during the last year of 2020, we realized that it was very easy for companies that are listed to raise equity or to raise capital than a lot of entities that are not really listed.
Yeah. Fergus, you want to come in?
Well, I think further to what Thapelo said, I think for private entities out there, there's a lot of benefit for listing on the Botswana Stock Exchange, especially where those entities are looking at the next growth, be it locally or regionally. So I'll definitely support the initiative. And I know the BSE does engage quite extensively through various programs with those entities to try and get them to list.
Yeah, so I think it gives us a perfect opportunity to talk about that strategy that Thapelo referred to earlier, the strategy to get more listings onto the Botswana Stock Exchange.
Yes, thank you. I think the strategy in terms of getting more listings in the Botswana Stock Exchange is multi-pronged. Firstly, 2 years ago, in fact, in 2019, we launched a TPD SME mentorship program, where we identified a number of companies operating in Botswana to teach them about the stock market, and also to teach them about governance, to teach them about corporate finance, and also to get companies that are listed to show or to share stories of being listed with them. We had about 20 companies coming up in 2019. Last year, we couldn't run it because of COVID. This year, we have about 13 companies. Our view is that we are building up potential for these companies to actually list in the medium to long term. And I'm happy to note that majority of these companies have actually shown a lot of interest to the market to list in Botswana. And also the other strategy is to open up our market to sort of internationalize our attraction to listing. That is why we partnered even with CNB today to really reach out to the outside world in terms of companies that can actually come to Botswana, use Botswana as a capital raising platform and expand in the region. I mean, out of about 26 or 24 domestic listed companies, including Letshego, they have set up in Botswana, but they have expanded in Africa using Botswana as a base. And we continue to preach this strategy, which have proved to be very successful with majority of our companies that are listed here. And also in terms of the market, I mean, we offer free services in terms of advising companies on the benefits of listing. We do that for free to companies across the economy. And the strategy seems to be working quite well because of the response that we're actually getting.
Yeah. Who are you targeting in terms of those companies that you are seeking to come onto the Botswana Stock Exchange outside of Botswana itself? I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. There's an interesting trend I've picked up in the last couple of months or so where there appears to be a drive from Rwanda to get investment from the western part of the African continent. So we've seen forays, for instance, to Ghana, forays to Nigeria from the eastern part of the continent.
Yeah, I think majority of the companies that we've been targeting, some of them are based in South Africa.
Sure.
Some have previously used some destinations as Mauritius, and some actually use some of the countries north of Botswana, Zimbabwe. We presently even have an MOU with Zimbabwe Stock Exchange to let companies in Zimbabwe to come and list in Botswana as a platform, because it's easier to raise capital here in Botswana than in Zimbabwe. So it's actually a number of countries that we have targeted, and I think the strategy in terms of the response seems to be working generally fine.
Yeah. What about the African what do we call it again? Is the African Securities Exchange Association? Where does that collaboration come in? Because in part you are working together, but in part you also competing to get the same companies to come onto your different exchanges.
Yeah, I think the collaboration is much more in terms of the listings, because sometimes it's good for companies to list in multiple exchanges, especially exchanges like Botswana, where investors, foreign investors, will be happy to come into the market because it's easy for them to come and buy shares or investment in Botswana than in other African countries because of regulation and legislation. And when you look at some of the companies that are dual listed in other markets, it's actually to help liquidity in terms of the primary market, because when it's dual listed, maybe in Botswana or in Zimbabwe or in Zambia, a lot of other investors based outside Africa will ordinarily look at the preference market to buy these shares, and they will come to Botswana to buy some of these shares. And in turn, what do? We actually get some of the shares from the primary register in some of the markets, and this drives up liquidity going forward. And that is why we have actually harmonized our listing rules in SADC, is to make sure that most of the companies can actually list in multiple exchanges, and this becomes easier for even the citizens of those exchanges to buy shares of those companies. Yeah.
In fact, in part, what we are doing is what in my language we would say you are trying to measure a snake with a piece of string when the snake itself is there. Fergus, life as a listed company in Botswana and outside of Botswana. Talk to us.
It's interesting, great. Like I said earlier, being the largest indigenous listed entity has brought with it a lot of attention, both from local and international investors. Today, as I mentioned, I've got an equity listing on the Botswana Stock Exchange, debt on the Botswana Stock Exchange. We've been able to list some debt as well on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We've been able to list equity on the Namibian Stock Exchange. It's interesting, but it also gives us a lot of room and leeway to go into other markets and explore how we can continue to expand. What is great about the Botswana Stock Exchange is like I said, our ability to be available to even our customers as investors in Letshego. The challenge, I think, as Olibile said earlier, and probably a challenge to Retsole, is still around liquidity within the market. We think that with more liquidity and possibly even more participators within the Botswana Stock Exchange, we'll start seeing a more vibrant overall operating environment.
Yeah, but how has it been navigating the different rule sets in the different countries that you operate in?
I think the fact that with Botswana Stock Exchange, right, it does hold very high governance standards and listing rules.
Yeah.
That's really helped us to be able to replicate that across the countries where we've been listing both debt as well as equity.
Yeah. Well, give them some free advice. I'm sure you've got ideas from where you sit, from your bigger brothers here.
As RMB, we actually have an annual publication that we put out called Where to Invest in Africa.
I actually have reported on it, by the way.
You have, yeah. So it's a great publication.
It is.
And it speaks to both the economic climate in those different countries. It speaks to the governance structures that exist in the respective countries, the investment climate, as well as any other information that an investor might actually be interested in. But I think in terms of maybe just bringing it locally, I think there's a lot of opportunity for us in some sectors to encourage corporates to list their companies through regulations where possible. We have seen that in some countries, there are some industries that are considered to be of strategic importance to the country, and regulation. I know Botswana is a free economy as much as possible, but regulations have been set up to encourage these companies to list either through tax benefits without necessarily forcing them to list. They can be encouraged to list through maybe tax breaks, or we can find a way to incentivize these companies to list on the exchange by offering other incentives. I think at the moment, for debt instruments, as an example, where companies are raising debt, we have had engagements around how we can make it very, very cheap for these instruments to be listed in order to encourage liquidity. So I think there are various measures that we can put in place to make it more attractive for companies to list both their debt and equity by giving them direct value through different incentives. So.
Absolutely. Tabelo, is that a conversation perhaps to be had with government about perhaps looking at tax breaks as a way of trying to attract more companies to come into Botswana and therefore by extension list on the Botswana Stock Exchange? Because I know you have referred to lower capital gains tax in Botswana as compared to other countries within the region.
Yes, that is the conversation that we have had with government. I think for the past year or so, we've actually argued government to consider offering a number of incentives to some of these companies, especially that some of these companies are doing business in Botswana. And ordinarily, when they list in the market, majority or some of the investors will be ordinary Botswana or ordinary citizens. And therefore, they'll be able to share what they make in the country with the locals. We've had conversations around tax benefits. Indeed, of course, to convince government on giving tax, it will still an uphill battle, especially considering the dire need for capital by government, because it will basically mean they're losing on the tax revenue. But I think government is still engaging with us, and I think it's some of the things that we've actually looked at, and also we have raised that point. I think in terms of other sectors where we have seen in other countries where regulation was also used to look at some of the sectors that can actually be guided in terms of listing, because they are very strategic. But like Ulivile says, Botswana operates a very liberal and free market economy, and it's one of the competitive advantages that the country offers, and therefore it will always be very right that we tread carefully in terms of how we implement that. Yeah. But yes, I think it's a conversation that we have had with government.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation. Lots of things to learn, new things that I had no idea about, and I'm glad to have been a part of it. I want us now to consolidate our thoughts. I'll begin with you, Fergus, just in terms of perhaps key messages that you would like to deliver to counterparts of yours that are still sitting outside of the stock exchange and to the stock exchange itself.
Thank you very much, Godfrey. Big upside, ability to get capital, grow your business, ability to shine, given the level at which the Botswana Stock Exchange currently operates, the ability to also be a broad-based financial or a broad-based business with a broad-based ownership. Those are the big takeaways for us. And we encourage every entity out there to take advantage and go list on the Botswana Stock Exchange.
Absolutely. And Gail, to empower individuals as well in the process. Thanks very much for those thoughts. Olabile?
I think for me, it's really to encourage companies that haven't listed yet, or those that have delisted, to come back to the stock exchange. There's a lot of benefit in accessing the capital markets as one of your funding options. I think traditionally in our market, companies have always resorted to simple bank funding as a source of liquidity for both our operations as well as for expansion. And I would just like to implore corporates that are operating in the Botswana market to access the capital markets to diversify their funding base and also to help drive up liquidity, because eventually once the markets are quite well developed, it will benefit them, because it will also lower the cost of accessing funding in a market. So the more developed markets actually are, the better it is for everyone. It does provide an additional pool of liquidity for other operations that the corporates might want to go into. So I would really encourage corporates out there in the Botswana market to consider coming to the market as the sophistication of our companies also grows over time.
100%. Thapelo, you have the final say.
Yeah, I think as the Botswana Stock Exchange, we offer a platform where companies have successfully raised capital in the market. And these companies might be Botswana companies or might be companies based outside Botswana. And we have offered them the best platform in terms of their capital raising requirements. And also for investors, I think we continue to run a market with high integrity based on good market practices. And we still continue to offer diversity in terms of the investors, and also diversity in terms of the investment instruments in the market. And therefore, we're a good destination for investment for more investors.
I would definitely agree with you. Any place you get a place where you can get a dividend yield of 16%, I can't argue with that. But key message, liquidity. And of course, numbers will bring liquidity. Let me thank you, lady and gentlemen, for participating in this discussion where we've shone a light on the Botswana Stock Exchange. From all of us here at CNBC Africa, until next time, goodbye.